Okay, so I've got your book, Scale and Sell. Sweat. I've been doing the sweating already.
The sweating never stops. That's a part of
it stops. And I think that, like everybody, you run a business and you think it's unique, and I understand that there's always going to be slings and arrows thrown at you, and people will copy and do all sorts of things to break that down. You sent me a message to say, what's the main problem against growth? Now, I never replied because I discussed it with my wife last night as well, and it's more complicated than my problem is X, because as every business, I don't know how many guys work for Aurik and how many business guys are here, but every business goes through its ups and downs, and some of them, take you back down again. So we're in a rebuilding phase for the last 4 years. We were a family business, and I was kind of doing the handover, and things went very badly, whereby we suffered some fraud and that kind of thing, and almost destroyed the company. We lost 70% of we operated on a franchise system before. We lost about 70% of our franchisees through this whole process. So at that stage, I would ask you just different questions as to what the limit or the problem was with growth. Right now, it's a complex problem, obviously, because our whole team, you talk about teams, our team has slimmed down to those that I can trust and that we can work together and are rebuilding. Fortunately, we have a fairly reliable product, which is we watch over very carefully. But my problem is I'm fully engine room. I mean, I've got my engine room work on clothes.
Okay, all right. So then there are a couple of things that are interesting over there. The first is, and I'm going to talk to it in broad terms, because
yes.
If your question is how do you get out the engine room reliably without putting yourself at risk because of what you've experienced previously, it's no different to how you get out the engine room in any other instance. And here's the thing. The engine room is where most of us feel strongest and safest, because you feel that you're very much in control, which you are. But if you don't get out the engine room, it does a couple of things. The first thing it limits your growth, because you only have so much time and so much psychic energy to pour into this business day in and day out. The second thing it does, Garth, is that it builds a weak team. Because by you being in the engine room, in effect, it means you don't have confidence in the team. In effect, it means you're micromanaging. In effect, it means you believe that you know best around how to stabilize, sustain, and keep the business or maintain the value of the business. And all of that is not untrue in the early stages of a business. So in a turnaround situation, you absolutely are in the right place. But the way that you get out the engine room is by simplifying the business in its purest form. So if I go back to Jack the Baker, he was where you are today. I can promise you that. 16 years ago. Incidentally, that business 16 years ago doing 58 million Rand, today does 1.3 billion Rand. He was 54 16 years ago. He started the business at 27. He's as smart as he was then as he is today. He works as hard today as he did then. So why did the growth suddenly come through? A large part of why the growth came through is because of what he did. 16 years ago, he had 4 different businesses operating in one. He was supplying hotels. He was doing restaurants, serving people like you and me, coffee shops. I mean, we're the worst, business to consumers, the really, really rough end of the business spectrum. He was supplying baking machines to bakeries. And those 3 businesses in their own right create so much complexity in operations that without him there, no one knew what to do, when to do, how to do it. So the first thing is to always simplify how your business is going to stand out in a crowd. And simplify it by saying, I can't be all things to all people. I'm going to choose a very distinctive 1, 2, 3 for example, customer segments. I'm going to intimately understand what experience they need, and I'm going to do the hard work of articulating that experience by the activities that would be performed in marketing, sales, and fulfillment that will create that experience each and every time. And I'm going to do it in its simplest form, and I'm going to do it with my team. Because to the extent that you can build a system of marketing, as he did, into the hotel sector, he was able to do a couple of things. Number one, he was able to find the best person to become responsible for that system, as opposed to looking at just a CV or a resume, taking a guess whether Garth is the right guy or not. I could interview Garth and say, these are the activities around how you market this business. Have you performed these activities before? Oh, tell me about your experience in performing these activities. So it makes the whole process of evaluating talent and skill far more effective. The next thing is, when you have the system, what you're delegating is a system of activities, not an instruction. So without the system that you have built and know works, what are you delegating to get that monkey off your back, that operational pressure off your back? If you're delegating a system, you know exactly what you're delegating. It reduces the miscommunication, it closes the expectation gap between you and that particular team member. And most importantly, it allows you to manage whether in performing those activities, they're getting it right. And then the final thing it lets you do, Garth, and here's the toughest part, mate. When you delegate, despite the fact that you've delegated a system, despite the fact that the system should have, would have, and must be built with that team member, they are still going to get elements of it wrong. And what a system allows you to do is to limit the risk of the wrongness, of the pain, of the cost of getting something wrong. Because ultimately, we all learn through the mistakes we make. We don't learn through the successes we've achieved. So it's a method of delegation that is built on the back of simplifying the business and reducing it to a set of activities, as opposed to a job description that you're looking for someone to perform to give you some breathing space in one part of the business so you can focus on other parts of the business. And that's the rebuild strategy that is most consistently reliable and dependable. So I hope that helps.
It does, yeah. So the next step, as you say, if you go the investigation part and looking at the current situation, what's the process with that?
Sorry, from which perspective, Garth?
When you said, like, how do we get involved with you guys, and how do you? I kind of missed.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, I understand the question. So in effect, what would happen is one of my colleagues would obviously reach out to you and meet with you, and we would do so with the view to understand what is the current status quo of the business. Where are you today? Where are you today? How does it look today? How does it work today? And we have a very particular methodology to understand that. That sets the port we will be sailing from. Most importantly, what do you want in the next 3 to 5 years? In other words, where are we sailing to? What revenues do you want? What profitability do you want? What lifestyle and experience do you want as an owner of a business in the business itself? In your case, you've made it very clear. I need to get out of the engine room and onto the bridge. Clear and crisp. Because to the extent that I'm in the engine room, it's holding me back, it's holding the business back, and it's preventing me from achieving what I want to achieve, given the opportunity I've earned already. So we get a very clear sense, where are we today, where do we want to be, and what do we need to get right to get from where we are today to that future position. They then bring it back to the broader team. We look at the business carefully, we look at what the expectations are very carefully, and if we believe, we think we can close that gap working with you and your team, we'll provide you with a fully costed proposal. Our proposals have got 3 tiers to it. There's a provisioning fee of 9,500 Rand, I think it is. There's a monthly administration or management fee that sits at around 6,800 Rand. And then the balance of it is all based on growth in revenues. So if we can't grow your business, and we don't believe we can grow your business in doing what we do, we will part as colleagues and friends rather than as clients and customers who are going to disappoint each other.
Yeah.
We simply can't afford to. If we don't believe we can deliver that growth outcome, we'll give you very good reasons why, but we don't proceed because we would burn. And then once that's done, we engage. And in that engagement process, that's where I mentioned we run the deep diagnostics with the view to set very, very clearly defined goals. And based on those goals, we configure the asset of value growth system to deliver that as an outcome of our relationship.
Thank you for answering that.
Pleasure. Thank you. Other questions? Should we talk a little bit about that succession piece? Succession is such a fascinating thing, especially if it's in a family business or if it's from one tier of leadership to the next tier of leadership. You know, it's a hard thing to get right. And it's a hard thing to get right because very often, all of us, in fact, all of us, and Ari, you should know this well. You should know this well. This gets spoken about extensively in the Talmud, in the Kabbalah, amongst other things, which I've had privileged access to over time. All of us operate in a place called unconscious competence, automatic experience. You know, they say the process of learning, when you start, you don't know what you don't know, which is always dangerous, but it can be very useful if you're doing a turnaround, because that's where you have to take big risks and make very, very aggressive decisions very quickly. Eventually you get to a point where you realize what you need to know, but you don't have the skill to do it. After that, you get to a point where you now have the skill and you know what to do, but it takes an enormous amount of effort. And then finally, you land up where most of us are now, where what you do is almost automatic. They call it instinct or gut feel or intuition. It's a good place to be because, in effect, it makes you feel that you have some level of control. It's an equally very bad place to be because, in effect, it can keep you in a comfort zone. And it keeps you in a comfort zone in the following way. The nature of the market that we're working in, all of us, is changing at such a pace. If I look at how customer requirements have changed, because the environment that we live in has changed, whether it be political uncertainty, whether it be inflation, whether it be currency depreciation, whether it be safety and security, there is no consistent lifestyle that's available to anyone, anywhere, anymore, at all. So when the environment that we all live and work in changes, the problems we need solved and how they come about change incrementally, equally. And to an extent that you want to maintain your business or grow it, you need to understand what those early signals of change are that your customers and clients will be experiencing before they're even aware of the fact that that change is taking place. It means that you need to build a business as close to the lived reality and experience of your customers as opposed to building a business that has a very strong product technical capability orientation or service design orientation. And to the extent that we have seen businesses turn around their attention to say, actually, the business we are in has nothing to do, in fact, with our product, which is just a commodity, or our service, which is equally just a commodity. It has everything to do with owning and dominating the experience for 1, 2, or 3 segments of the industry you play in. It turns the entire business facing the customer in such a way that you get the earliest signals of change before most of your competitors do. Because I can promise you most of your competitors, go and visit their website. They will have the products we have on their website. They will define their customers in broad industry terms. They never get into the detail of the experience and problem they solve at a customer perspective. And if you're trading in an environment where most of your competitors have that on their website, and you build your business to be customer facing rather than product pushing, it sets you apart immediately. That's how you get the earliest signals. There's a great book written about this by Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel. And he says, snow, something that none of us are too familiar with. Snow melts slowly from the outside edges and then suddenly from the center. And what kept him awake 24/7 while he was building Intel was, what won't he see that he ought to have seen that would put him onto a back foot saying our product is good enough when in fact it wasn't, in a rapidly changing world of ICT. So there's some interesting lessons there, because I think we're living in a place and time today where that's more relevant than ever before. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Sorry, Garth, another Garth, the other Garth, Mr. Watson.
I saw him there.
Hi. Firstly, I just want to say thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here to listen to you speak. I've read your books multiple times.
Thank you.
So it's really nice to be here. I've been in conversation with one of your colleagues, Monet. I subsequently have a meeting with him tomorrow. In regards to your systems, how involved do you get? If we have a current system that you're operating, do you look at the existing system and say, well, God, this is great, but it's not going to help you with the growth that we have now planned going forward? Do you have systems that you currently work with that you feel are best suited for the company? Would you give a bit of insight on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because, you know, the problem with the word system's been usurped by the world of technology. And it's wrong, because, I mean, you are a living, walking, breathing system in your own right. So if I were to strip your skin and strip your bones and muscles, effectively, you function and operate because of liver, lungs, kidney, spleen, and heart, led and governed by brain. So the word system effectively is a complete set of small independent things to create the whole experience. Okay, so if you look at your business as your body, your business too has liver, heart, kidneys, lung, and spleen. In business terminology, we say marketing, sales, operation, supply chain, team, finance. Okay, so holding on to that analogy, what is the system in business then? The way we look at it is we turn around and say a system is a set of activities placed into a sequence that give a measured outcome that can be taught with a job description and remunerated. So let's go back to the most classic example of a system, Jack the Baker. When he went into the hotel sector and he learned for the first time at the age of 55 that the food and beverage manager alone does not make the decision to onboard his offering, that in fact, finance weighs in, procurement weighs in, HR weighs in. He built a system, a marketing system. It was made up of content relevant to finance, which is different to the content relevant to food and beverage. For example, in bringing us on board as your vendor for 365 supply of croissants, we will deliver through our economies of scale price advantages you would not be able to enjoy in-house. So it's talking to the language of finance. with procurement, in bringing us on board, et cetera, we have fair trade policies fully accredited. Our occupational safety and health has been accredited and vetted by the following organization. So selling a commodity, but speaking the language of the intended recipient who's going to weigh in on the purchase decision. So he had content. He then had appropriate pictures that created identity and relatedness, because pictures speak 1,000 words. Third activity, putting the pictures and the content together in an email. Fourth activity, building a database of 100 procurement managers, 100 finance managers, 100 food and beverage managers, 100 HR managers. Next activity, sending it off to all of them on the 15th of the month. Next activity, seeing how many responded. So for every 100 hotels and every 400 emails, he was getting 50 responses back. That's a system. That's a system. That's how simple a system ought to be if you simplify your business in relation to positioning. Now, if you look at that, should I build that, I could get anyone on the screen to implement that system with a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of guidance, but with the training that's behind it, I have fully empowered you to run that system for me. And what took up 20% of his time, marketing to this segment, now takes up 5% of his time, sitting with you at the end of the month saying, Garth, did you roll out the system? What was the outcome? Garth, what are the improvements we can put in here? Because you're leading and driving the system now. That's the first part of system building. Once you've got that simply done and articulated, the next level will be, right, where can we bring technology in, or software, or IoT devices, or whatever the case might be, to improve the efficiency of how those activities take place? Because what goes horribly wrong is when it feels chaotic, and when you feel frustrated that you don't have access to the marketing outcomes, the sales outcomes, the operational outcomes, and so it goes, and someone arrives at your door in the shiny suit, waving a disc called an enterprise resource planning management software, SAP, for example, or Great Plains, for example, and it says, through implementing the software, all the activities in all parts of the business will be defined, you'll get data, and you'll be able to get performance from your team. If you start with that, as opposed to first building it in manual, it means a couple of things. You can never make the right decision which software is right. The second thing it means is that your business gets governed by a piece of software rather than by the client experience that you believe will set you apart in a very crowded space. I hope that makes sense. Does it answer
100%. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I think the wording, you get, as you said, you get overwhelmed by all this wording, and boil it down to KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Completely.
Really. Yes.
Completely. I mean, if you think about it, if all of us in business, if we could just do a few simple things exceptionally well each and every time, reliably and consistently, you will go streets ahead of your competitors.
A basic tick box of, did we call the client? Did we follow up?
Yep.
Did you say thank you? And just follow that copy and paste as an example. Yeah. Consistency.
You know what's interesting about the systems diagnostic we do? The systems diagnostic that we run, it's an on-site session, and it takes a day and a half. So it looks at all the activities making up these elements: marketing, sales, fulfillment, operations, administration, people, money, governance, etc., etc., etc. And then it says, of the 207 activities, this is what's in play, this is what's missing. So immediately we know where we're going to work first. But the second thing it does is it says, to what extent are your team applying the system on a day-to-day basis? Because if you think about what scale truly means, it means that each function in the business needs to be optimized. So the marketing system must be complete. The next thing it means, it must be applied. The third thing it requires is that it must be integrated into sales. So it needs to join sales to create that single experience from learning about your company, engaging with your company. Sales needs to be optimized. It needs to be adopted by the team, and it needs to be integrated into fulfillment so that the experience continues unbroken. And that's the truest definition of scale. We hear in media, oh, you must scale up, you must scale and grow. But actually, when you ask what scale truly means, most people never break it down to those effective building blocks. If we get that part right with you alone, that's what gets you onto the bridge for 70% of your time. Because I promise you, you know where the new markets are that you want to attack.
So the basic foundations, once you cast those foundations, you can go, but you need a base to start with.
Completely. How do you build a 50-story building? It starts with the foundation. If you get the
100%.
if you get the foundation set for 50 stories from the get-go, you'll be able to get to the 50th story.
Thank you. I've read, like I said, I've read your book multiple times, and I keep on smiling when you mention your baker friend, because when you found out there were more departments in the system, how he bit his tongue.
Yeah, and he had to a lot. And he was a short-tempered person who took up most of the frustration on me. That was a very interesting relationship. Yeah, when I can see you laughing at that. It wasn't funny at the time. I promise you. Any other thoughts? Brett, you're looking very severe and serious. I'm concerned about you, mate.
I'm thinking deeply, Pablo. Thank you.
Wayne. Wayne and Anna are the two most cheerful people on the screen that I can see.
I did have a question.
Yes.
We're a small animation studio that's recently incorporated in Ireland.
Yes, I saw that.
I'm going to be moving there in July. I mean, that's incidental, but the question I have is, well, we have sort of parallel tracks of developing our own IP, which is obviously, I call that climbing the Everest of story as a broad framework for myself. Like, that's the activity. It's long, it's slow. It takes fairly elite knowledge to create effective and globally appealing IP. It's not efficient because but it is elite, if you know what I mean. It's a slow slog. And then the other part is service, and I think of that as like a dynamo. I'm trying to just make that our margins are in our efficiency and in our knowledge, and also people trusting us, which is partly where Ireland comes in, is that it's a very well respected IP and copyright jurisdiction, and it's got great tax credits and that kind of stuff. I guess my question is, in that space of creativity, creative businesses, where a lot of that stuff is a little more
bespoke.
Yes, very bespoke. I mean, we've just finished 2 short films for a client, and each one is like, we're trying to create systems that are repeatable and reliable, but there's an element of rebuilding every single time.
Got it.
And even with IP, I mean, like, I'm trying to build ways of working where I can reliably know that artwork's going to come through. We can onboard a junior and say, this is how we develop a animated character from pencil sketches or whatever. This is our way of doing it. You can fit in that. You think about it this way, you approach it this way. So there are approaches and things I can implement. But in a business where the fear I have at the moment is that you just go after the next client, you rebuild from scratch, you finish. So far, very happy client. That helps you get the next job, hopefully, but you rebuild and obviously there are repeatable elements of that, understanding how to build quickly and all that kind of stuff. That was my question that arose for me.
So Wayne, listen, here's the hard decision. will have to take. You will have to take. So if you have deep expertise in something, right, in any particular discipline, you get your meaning by being challenged on that area of expertise so that you can increase your knowledge and insight. Because if you have a deep area of interest, it's like a surgeon. You know, a surgeon's happy to do surgery, but they get most excited when they face a particularly complicated or difficult surgery, because in that, you know that you're going to be stretched, and intellectually, it is profoundly interesting around how you solve a particular problem in your area of expertise. And I'm going to use a different word. It gives you meaning. And meaning's important. Meaning's really important, because if you don't have meaning or purpose in your business, you're not going to have this endless tank of fuel or passion to survive the multiple challenges that we all face in building any business. So that's absolutely critical. And evidently, doing the work you do and in the way you've described it, you've got bucket loads of meaning. Because the more complicated something is, the more of a challenge a client throws at you, the more exciting it is to innovate and express your expertise and deepen your expertise. Okay, now bear with me on this. Just bear with me on this. Purpose is only 50%, because purpose drives your passion. You've got to think clearly about what is your intent behind the business you build. So purpose answers the why I do what I do, or the what I do what I do. Intent answers why I do what I do. You've already got the foresight to very clearly define the fact that if what you do is going to be providing a bespoke service in each and every instance to meet the exact defined needs of very complicated clients with high demand, the life ahead of you is a roller coaster, and it will never ever change, because that is not a business that you can scale. If the intent is, I'm going to do what I do and find meaning in the work I do, but I'm going to find a way of doing it differently with the view to build a business that will, of a day, be able to be sold 10, 20 years from now, independently of me, so that I can monetize my 10, 15, 20 years of risk and sacrifice and consistent investment. That means you're starting with the end in mind, and it will yield a very different build outcome. So that's part one. Part two is this. Every business in the world has made up of two parts that fit with each other. If any of these two halves are missing, you have a failed enterprise, and you will never ever get beyond from where you are. The first part is the product or the service, and its only job is to solve a well-defined problem. That's what it does. Your product, the output of your product, solves a problem. The second part that sits over it is a commercial system and team that creates a well-defined experience. And in the same way you build that commercial system and team, activities in a sequence with measured outcomes that are optimized and integrated and adopted to create a consistent, reliable experience each and every time, you need to take that structure and respectfully simplify your product, ensuring that you solve a problem. Because if you don't do it that way, you'll never be able to break down the production process of your product in a manner that you can have a team deliver each element of that production process. So here's the tough part. The moment you get a client coming in saying, hey, Wayne, we want you to do this spectacular piece of work. No one's ever done it before. It's completely unique. It's going to stretch you beyond all possible scope. And you're going to get so turned on by delivering this, because it's going to demonstrate that you are the best in class. fine, you can play to that. But know that when you do, instead of saying no to that client, you're putting yourself in a position for roller coaster as opposed to a position for building an asset. And I'm going to give you a very, very direct story. About 12 years ago, these two fellows walk into the office. Hi guys, what do you do? They're we business partners. Both of them engineers, ICT engineers. And what do you do? We solve the problems that Data and Accenture can't solve for big, complicated corporate clients. So there was lots of ego, and lots of hubris, and lots of pride in the fact that they take on very, very, very difficult tasks and have succeeded in delivering a solution each and every time. And when I looked at their revenues over the last 3 years, there were the big spike of revenue with nothing in between, and another big spike of revenue and nothing in between. And I said, well, why are you here? And they said, we're running out of steam. It's exhausting. We can't hold on to our team. We invest deeply in our team each and every time to build their skill and capability to deliver on these projects. But then we go through these troughs where we can't afford to even pay salaries, and we lose the talent that we've invested in building. We land the next project, that talent's not available, and we have to recapacitate the team. Because if we don't, we'll end up doing the work, and we can't sustain 16, 18-hour days. The program that we undertook with them worked as follows. They eventually decided that they wanted to build in a more consistent, reliable stream of revenue as opposed to project-based revenue. They then looked at all their history, and what they identified is that one of the biggest issues they had solved for most of their corporate clients was building a supply database, a vetted, accredited supply database that wouldn't get very complicated clients into trouble regarding their supply chain. They then stripped that out and started to build it into a product at their own time, cost, and budget and expense. They then created a commercial system to market it, to onboard clients who were interested, and they moved from big project-based revenues to tiny, tiny, cumulative, annuity, incremental revenues. When we worked with them in the beginning, they were sitting with a team of 6, 7 people. Today they're sitting with, I think, 42 staff, and they're doing just under 500 million a year in revenues, made up of multiple small invoices, tiny invoices. So they had to translate their interest, passion, and excitement of their business away from the product onto the thing called an asset of value, and use their ability to design, create, and engineer on product to design, create, and engineer the entire system with both parts to find their satisfaction, meaning, and value in life. And they've managed to do that quite successfully. So it's an existential decision or a philosophical decision more than a business decision that you would need to take first.
And just one last question, I think, do you think there's scope to, I think, is there scope in your, or have you seen it succeed where there's almost 2 tracks within the business? There's like a specialist team that can take on special projects, and then there's the other business that is generating, slowly building annuity income through a repeatable product.
I haven't seen that yet. I'm very heavily influenced by people, obviously, I've met over the years. And I think that we live in such a highly competitive environment nowadays that I think it's very hard to be a decathlete because the amount of time, energy, and effort it takes, the moment that you step into a new market, you've put yourself into the center of the most vicious competitive environment in the world, relocating to Ireland and within your particular domain. I think that the winners over there are those who narrow as much as possible with the view to do a narrowly defined piece of work. Let me give you our example. Yeah, let's make it very real.
Mhm.
In our early days, because we worked with folks such as yourselves, our service broadened. You came on board, we would partner with you in the implementation of the asset of value system. Surely it made sense that we would also lend and provide a lending capability. Surely it made sense that we would also offer short-term insurance. Surely it made sense that we would also offer back office accounting. Because if we could get all fancy, like they teach in an MBA school, to upsell and cross-sell and through-sell and et cetera, get more revenue or more share of client pocket and all that kind of absolute corporate hogwash that they talk about. And we tried that in the beginning. And what we found out, Wayne, is that we started becoming mediocre at everything.
Mm.
The moment we went abroad, because we were pushed abroad by our clients in South Africa saying, we want to grow into pound markets, euro markets, dollar markets. And we suddenly realized that we were no longer playing in the provincial side track and field event. We were playing in the Olympics. We narrowed and decided to only do one thing, and that's to deliver a growth and value outcome through the asset of value growth system. The more we did that, the faster we innovated, the more we learned, the better we excelled. And every time we do that still, we improve by 1%. And that then sets us apart as a top tier player in the 100 meters, but we had to forego the discus, we had to forego javelin, we had to forego the marathons.
Mm.
And when you are in a very, very competitive space, my friend, the only way to succeed is you have to be the best.
Mm.
You have to be the best. And to be the best, you need to decide what your discipline is, and you need to deepen and deepen and deepen and deepen and deepen. So it's not the answer you want. The transition from where you are to that requires you to straddle both.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, these guys never went from projects alone into annuity. There was a very structured process through which they weaned themselves off the project and deepened the annuity product side.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Excellent. Good. I hope I haven't taken up more time. Well, I managed to have a bit of time on my side, so it's certainly, I'm very happy to stay on should there be one or two more questions. But if not, for those of you who joined us, thank you very much. And we certainly hope to see you in the very, very near future soon.